All right. Well, good morning. Welcome, everybody. My name is Randy Abernathy from RxM. And this talk is particularly timely as more and more organizations are moving to microservice architectures, cloud-native systems. Debugging those systems, especially the more mature ones that interact with lots of other systems, are kind of a challenging problem. And Istio brings some very interesting solutions. So one of the things I'd like to remind you of is that after the session, there's a review opportunity on sketch.com, so please make sure you jump in there and review the session. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome from Google, David Gageot.
Thank you. Oh, that's quite a room. Okay, so we're going to talk about Istio, and we're going to talk about how it can help you understand the bugs you've deployed and maybe fix them. So today I'm going to be a web developer. I'm going to deploy a web application on Kubernetes, and it's based on microservices. Way too many microservices compared to the application, but it's a good toy for me to play with. But I have a problem, and maybe you have the same problem as me. Sometimes I create bugs. Sometimes when I write code, there's bugs. Who does the same? Okay. Some of you are lying. Okay, all of you create bugs. So this is my small web application I'm going to deploy on Kubernetes. By the way, for my demonstrations, everything will be deployed on my machine. I'm using Docker for Mac that has support for Kubernetes. So everything is going to be deployed locally, and I'm going to show you my application. So it's just a quiz. You're shown two hexagons that are two products from the Google Cloud Platform, and there's one description, and you have to choose which one is the correct one. And so I'm going to deploy it. So usually you'd build Docker images and you apply some YAML to Kubernetes, but I've got a tool that I'm going to use for my demonstration. You don't have to think too much about the tool. It's just that with one command, I'm going to deploy my application to a running cluster. Okay? So we should see the application coming up very soon. Yeah, so there's liars here. Some people said they didn't write any bug. Well, I don't believe you. So it should come up quite quickly with it. Okay. Something already is not behaving right. Okay, so I've got a bug. Okay, so this is my application. Ooh. And it's showing hexagons. And sometimes there's a bug, because I told you I write bugs. Okay? So there's a bug, and I can take a look at what's going on. Usually I would open Chrome and see that one of the URL is not working properly. So sometimes it's sending me some JSON. Sometimes it's a 500 error. Okay? So not cool. So what can we do? First, we should acknowledge that Istio, we have a problem. Can you help me fix it? Because it would be nice if the application was deployed on a platform that gives me full visibility on what I've actually deployed. You see? It would give me the list of endpoints that are called on my application, on all the services. I could even maybe see distributed traces. It would be very helpful if I had that. The problem is Kubernetes doesn't give me that. You know that, right? If you install vanilla Kubernetes, you don't get that kind of visibility. You've got the list of the services you've deployed, you can see the logs, you can see maybe the status of each service, but you don't really see the big picture. So this is where Istio comes in. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'm going to show you how Istio works very briefly. So basically, this is my application deployed on a Kubernetes cluster. Every service runs inside a pod, a Kubernetes pod, and basically, when my users connect, they connect through an ingress, and then they talk to one service that talks to another, and then the way back, okay? And somewhere in that system, there's a problem. So enters Istio. Istio is a bunch of additional containers that will extend the platform. That is very important. It's not just that it's going to run on Kubernetes, it's going to extend Kubernetes. And it's going to extend Kubernetes to bring you lots of features that are going to bring visibility on what you've deployed and that are going to help you understand the bugs you've deployed. And how does it work? On each pod, inside each pod, there's going to be a small Envoy proxy who's going to be injected by Istio, and this proxy will capture the traffic coming in and out of the containers. Who knows Envoy? Quite a few people now? OK, so for those who don't know, it's like HAProxy or Nginx. It's a HTTP reverse proxy that is able to capture the traffic and maybe modify the query or modify the response. And also, what's very important, it's able to capture a lot of information that it can then send to other components of Istio to give you, the developer, a lot of visibility. You're then going to be able to observe what you've deployed. Let me show that to you. So just to be sure that you all understand, each Envoy will capture all the traffic, and it's going to bring a lot of features to you. So let me start by connecting to one of the additional components that Istio is running, which is called Kiali. I'm going to connect to Kiali through port forwarding. And I'm going to create some false traffic to my website to make sure that it's activated. Okay? So this is Kiali. It's a very nice tool that you can use to visualize what you've deployed. Because when I go all the way to microservices and I deploy lots of microservices, very quickly I don't understand what I've deployed. I've got the docs, I've got the code, but I don't really understand what I've deployed. And this is the kind of tool that we really need. Let me show that to you. So here I can see the real architecture of my application. I can see the ingress and then each service that compose my application. And I can see which one is behaving correctly or not. I can see that the traffic somewhere in this component doesn't behave correctly because the rest of the chain is all green, but then the response are sometimes in error. So it's very, very convenient to see that kind of information. Lots of companies adopt Istio just for that, just to see what they've actually deployed. OK? If you want to go deeper, you can also use the Grafana Dashboards. I'm going to connect to them. I'm going to send some traffic just to be sure. And this is the kind of dashboards that you have by default when you install Istio. It's a dashboard that gives you some kind of health indicator for every of your services. So I can see that basically the UI does not behave correctly, but I know why. It's because it's querying the game microservice that is not behaving correctly. I can zoom in. I can really start to understand what's going on in my application. I can really see that some queries are not behaving correctly. Let me show that to you somewhere. Up. So I should see errors here. What do I see? No, I'm not in the right service. Let me go back. Sorry. Oops. OK, so game. Yeah, game. Here we are. So you can see that Istio has the notion of the HTTP protocol. So it's able to understand that some microservices are sending errors to the user. So I can see in green when it's behaving correctly, and I can see in yellow when it's not behaving correctly. OK? So that's very convenient. That's really the kind of observability that we need to understand what's going on at the HTTP level. But it also works with gRPC, and that's very convenient. What's better than that is, thanks to Istio, I can have distributed traces almost for free. Let me show that to you. I'm going to connect to Jagger, not this one. And with Jagger, I can show some of the logs that were captured. For example, here you will see two kinds of patterns. You will see one that says 10 spans and one that says 48 spans. There's an error. So let's drill down this one. This one shows the interactions with all my services from the users. OK, so the user connects to the ingress, that talks to the UI, that talks to the game microservice, that talks to the ref microservice multiple times. In fact, the first time, I can zoom in and see that it's querying for the /count URL. In fact, I know the application. The game is supposed to ask the referential how many hexagons there is, and then it's supposed to take one random, another one random. So first query is to get the count of hexagons. Second query is to take the first hexagon, and then again the first. Oh, that's strange. And then again the first. Oh, there's a pattern here. So something in my code makes it impossible to get two random hexagons. See, it's always querying for the same URL. So each time it's getting the same hexagon, and again with only one hexagon, it's not as fun as again with two hexagons, right? So I can understand what's going on. I can drill down to another interaction. This time I can see the difference. It's asking for the number of hexagons, and then it's asking for random hexagons, the 50th one, and then it's asking for another hexagon. OK, this explains why it works sometimes and why it doesn't work the other time. OK? So you see, you get these distributed traces almost with no change in your code base. It works with any language. It's just added by the platform from the outside. As soon as you deploy your application on Istio, and you make a very small modification to your source base, to your code base, to propagate the open tracing headers, you get tracing for free. You don't have to embed any additional library. It works with any language. So I think I can understand where the problem comes from, and I can maybe show you. So this is one very convenient comment that I put in my code base, and you should do the same for all the bugs you create, right? Put a comment first, then the bug. Okay, do that. You thank me. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time fixing the bug. I'm going to fix it. It's somewhere here. I'm going to just remove those nasty lines, and I'm going to just rebuild all my components to make sure, and it builds. And I fix the bug, and so basically I can just ship it, right? It works, it compiles. I mean, I removed lines. I cannot create a new bug by removing lines, can I? Oh, OK, I can. OK. So what I could do also, I could use Istio for another thing that it's good at. It's good at helping me deploy my application in a more controlled manner. So I've got a fix, but my users, they're still seeing the bug. So I'm going to deploy my fix in a more controlled manner. I'm going to deploy it with a canary deployment. Who knows what a canary deployment is? Quite a lot of people. Those of you who know what it is, how hard it is to implement in your code base, quite hard sometimes. Yeah, it can be very hard. And you have to do it for any language, every language. With Istio, it's way easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to deploy the fixed version of our game, and we're going to make sure that all the users, they go through all the V1 microservices, so they will see the bug. But only one user, David, based on HTTP headers or cookies, is going to go through a different set of microservices. I'm going to make sure that when the UI talks to the game and it's David who's asking, it's going to talk to the fixed version of the game. That's very powerful. It's done at the Envoy level. It's going to change the destination of your microservice just depending on HTTP headers. Let me show how to configure that. So basically, I just have to add an additional deployment to my Kubernetes deployment to deploy the fixed version of my game. And I've got to configure Istio. So Istio, as I said, extends the Kubernetes platform. So it's going to add some additional types of resources that I can use to configure my application. And virtual service is one of those additional resource types. With virtual service, I'm able to change the flow of the queries from the users depending, for example, on HTTP headers. So I can say that when one microservice is talking to the game microservice, Istio is going to look at the HTTP headers, and if the user is exactly David, it's going to change the destination to another version of the same microservice. All the users, they're going to talk to the V1. David is going to talk to the fixed version. Let me deploy that. OK, so I'm going to deploy it. It's just reconfiguring the whole application. the application is going to continue to respond to my users, but it's going to change slightly in its behavior. So right now, my users, they see that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. Okay? If I do it with a curl, sometimes it fails, sometimes it works. If I change the header and I say, OK, David is going to query that page, it's going to work all the time. Yay! Seems like I fixed the bug. I can also, I've got a nice extension on Chrome that I can use to set a request for my request header. So I'm going to say that user is always David. And now my application is always behaving correctly. Cool. I can really have internal users test the application, or I can have a group of external users test the application before I deploy it to all my users. So what does Chuck Norris say? He says, OK, if it works for David, it's going to work for everybody, right? I mean, all the users, they're the same. I mean, sometimes they use different pages, but most of the time they use the same, right? No? OK, so what we could do, we could maybe try to identify if the application is going to behave correctly in front of all the users. But there's a nice way to do it with traffic mirroring. With traffic mirroring, we are able to deploy two versions of the same application. One, the V1 is going to answer the users, so they're going to see the bug, but also their queries will be sent to the fixed version of the game, so that we see here if it behaves correctly in front of all the users. So it's just that the UI is going to send the same query to the V1 version of the game and to the fixed version of the game. The green line is going to be async, so that I don't block my users. It's just that I can then open my dashboards and see if the fixed version would behave correctly in front of all the users. This is the kind of questions that I can answer. So how do I do that? I just have to reconfigure my virtual service. So I remove everything that I did before, and I'm just going to change that part. I'm going to say that if one service is talking to the Hexagon game service, I'm going to send it to the V1, but also I'm going to mirror all the queries to the fixed version. Boom, that's done. That's done. So I can check that it's really done. I'm going to maybe use the dashboards, and I'm going to send some traffic. Send some traffic. So we can really take a look at how it behaves. So it should come up very quickly. Yeah. So you can see that here, this is the V1 version of my service. Still has errors. Here, this is the fixed version, getting queries from actual users. And it's behaving correctly all the time. And the latency is good, and I can zoom in and see that it's behaving correctly. I can take a look at the logs, everything that I can do. My users won't see the difference. They're still using the broken version. OK? Oops. So that's very convenient. Lots of the teams I talk to, they don't do that kind of thing. They basically try to capture all the traffic for one day, and then they try to replay the traffic on their CI/CD to see if actual users would break the system. This is a much easier way to do it. It requires more resources on your production platform, but it's easier to set up. OK, works for all the users. Let's deploy it. Like, press the button, and boom, all the users will be switched. We can do better than that. We can have a Bluegreen deployment. So Bluegreen deployment is just another pattern you can use to deploy your fixed application. This time, we're going to say that 80% of the users are going to talk to the V1 version, and 20% of the users are going to talk to the fixed version. And we're going to then change that weights depending on how well the application behaves. OK? Do you want to do that? Just a change in the YAML. I hope you all like YAML. Do you? Yes, because you're going to have to. And those YAML files, they are quite small compared to what you can come up with Istio, but this is quite interesting to see that they are small but yet powerful. So basically, you can say that all the traffic going to the Hexagon game 100% is going to go to the V1, and 0% will go to the fixed version. So basically, if I deploy that, it's not going to change anything for my users. But let me try to make sure that I don't break things just by adding a bug in my YAML. That can happen. OK, so basically, my application is still sending some errors to my users. Maybe I should deactivate that. So yeah, errors. So I can even see it better with this. Sometimes it's OK, sometimes it doesn't error. So I'm going to change the weights. I'm going to change the weights if I remember where they are. OK. I'm going to change the weights like 80-20. And I'm going to run that to make sure that it's reconfigured. So usually I would use my dashboards, or I could even have I could even use the Istio API to write some kind of bot, that monitors the application and then change the weights. You can do that, but I'm going to do it manually. So it seems like it's maybe a bit better. I don't know. I'm going to change the weights, and I'm going to deploy it again. OK, we should see a difference now. Should be better for my users. Yeah, see? There's only a few errors. So let's do that all the way. Come on. Yeah. So I can finally play my game, which is a very nice game. OK. I don't know if you agree. OK, woo, we're live. We fixed the bug. OK, what did we do? We used Istio to get full visibility on what we've actually deployed. We can really see all the components we deployed, how each other is talking to the other ones. We could really see all the endpoints that were called, and we could see distributed traces without even touching our code base. And of course, we deployed the new application in a more control manner with maximum confidence. So you don't have to go all the way through Canary, Bluegreen, Mirror. You can do your own things, but it's very convenient to be able to use those tools to understand what's going on and to deploy your application in a more controlled manner. OK? So Istio can do much more for you than just that. This is really an intro to show you that developers can really leverage Istio. It's not just operations. As a developer, you can really leverage Istio. You can test it on your machine. If you install Istio, you can get much more than that. You can really add some more resilience to your microservices. Because as soon as we deploy many microservices, nothing happens in memory anymore. It's all connected by the network. So it's very useful to understand what's going on, but it's also very useful to have some kind of additional mechanism brought by the platform, such as retries. If a microservice is talking to another one, Istio can retry many times in case of an error. And then after a few retries, it will stop. You can also inject circuit breakers. So this is the kind of thing that you'd usually embed into your code base, right? But now you can just remove that from your code base and let the platform do it for you. You can configure which service is going to have a circuit breaker. You can configure a lot of things. You can add some more security. As soon as you install Istio, your microservices can talk on HTTPS instead of HTTP. It's all going to be taken care of by the platform. So really, I encourage you to go to more Istio talks today to understand more, and I encourage you to test it. As I told you, I just installed it on Docker for Mac, and it works great. You just need a lot of memory, and yeah. Just for the short story, the other day I did the same demonstrations with only 2 gigs of memory, and Istio wouldn't start with 2 gigs of memory. Okay, so you just you press the buttons and it doesn't work. So it needs a bit more than that. But it's very convenient to test it locally. So that's about it from me. Thank you very much, and I'm open to a lot of questions.
Hi, thank you very much for that. So I was just curious, what's the performance overhead that Istio adds if you were to use it? Because obviously it's a sidecar to your main.
So the question is, what's the impact in terms of performance? So that's a very good question because there is an impact. As soon as you intercept the traffic and inspect it or modify it, you add some overhead. And if the call stack is very deep, you add an overhead on each microservice, so it can add up. So there's a lot of work that has been done on Istio for the last few releases to make that overhead be much lower. So we can see a lot of users who have adopted Istio very early on now find out that it's quite good now. It's a quite good balance between overhead and features. So you should really try it out. And also that's very important that you don't have to install all the features from Istio from the beginning. The idea is that you should have a problem, you should try to fix it, and you should try to find the features in Istio that you really need. You don't have to install like Kiali and Dashboard and Prometheus and TLS. You don't have to install everything at once. Just install it, see if the performance is good for you. Be assured that the engineering team, they are trying to take it even lower, but I think that the balance is quite good already.
Here?
Yeah.
I have a question about Mixer V2 that should fix the most of the problems with overhead. Is it coming, or what's the state of it?
I have no idea. So I encourage you to, there is a panel with lots of Istio engineers. I don't remember if it's today or tomorrow, but you should really go there and ask your question. Like, they know better than me.
Okay, I have a two-part question. First part is, if you're using the traffic mirroring in your linear call stack, you would effectively double the load on your microservice one step behind. Is that correct?
It is exactly that, yeah.
Is there a solution to that? It's the first part. And the second part is, what would you do if you have requests with side effects, or get requests if you have a post request which actually does something?
Yeah. So let me come. I don't know which slide it was. Something like maybe that. Oh. Come on. Just we're gonna make it. So yeah, traffic mirroring. So yes, it's gonna double the need for resources after the UI. In my case, for everything except the UI. And in my demo, all the traffic from the fixed version of the game goes back to the V1 version of the ref. Maybe don't do that. It's just that my application is read-only, so there's no side effect. So if I send the same read query to the database, it's going to be OK. In real life, I might have to deploy a mock here, or I might have to deploy a full string of fixed services. So there's no easy way to do that. But this is why it's still complicated to set up real traffic mirroring. I think the need for additional resources is not so important. The real problem is side effects. So what I would do is I would deploy an additional set of services and maybe a mock database. But it's not going to be always the same as if it was in front of real users. It's mostly the same, which is good enough. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I love YAML, but my operation guys doesn't. Is there any plan to have a UI for control Istio, for instance, for release management and also for RBAC features, which is quite cumbersome to manage them only through YAMLs?
I don't know. Same answer. You should ask somebody else. I don't know. But yeah, YAML.
Hi, another question here. So maybe dumb question, but can Istio help me to attach a debugger to my application?
Sorry?
Can I use Istio to attach a debugger to my application, because I like to use breakpoints and
Yeah. So I don't know if you can. If there's something special in Istio to do that, but you could also install Cloud Code. Cloud Code is an extension for VS Code or IntelliJ that you can use to debug your applications that are deployed on a Kubernetes cluster. It's basically quite simple. You just have to find the right pod where your container is running and open the right port, and Cloud Code can do that for you. Istio, I don't think there's such features to do that.
Hi, can you please tell some similarities and differences between Istio Ingress and Kubernetes Ingress?
That's a good question, and I wonder if in the latest version of Istio, if it's not going to. So in recent versions, the ingress was replaced by the gateway. So that it's not really the same, and you should maybe have an ingress in front of your cluster and then use the gateway to do Istio things. So at the beginning, it was very much the same, and you had like one ingress controller with Istio features, but lacking all the other features you expect from Nginx and other. And now it's like there's your ingress and there's the gateway, and we're trying to make sure that you don't use one or the other. But yeah. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, so we run a workload which is highly regulated, and one of the requirements is that data in transit is to be encrypted. And of course, it's a lot of work. We have to deploy server certificates and manage it and set up encryption standards all of the time. So is Istio a good drop-in replacement using mutual TLS, where we could just skip all of that? Or are there any security risks that we would be exposed to if we were to do that?
So one of the main features of Istio is that you can really use it to do the mutual TLS for you. So you can delegate it to the platform, and you don't have to implement it in every language. And especially older components, you have to go back to them and try to sort out how to do some HTTPS. So you can really delegate it to Istio. And there's a couple of knobs you can turn to make it work the way you want. You can make it by namespace, or you can make it for a given set of pods. So you can really try it and maybe use your current setup and maybe try it and see if it's good enough for you. I'm pretty sure it's going to be good enough for you. You can really control the keys, etc. So yeah, you should really try it. It's going to be much easier to maintain. Your last question, yeah?
Yeah. I have two questions. First question is that I'm new to Kubernetes, so can we install Istio as a pod? The second question is that is Istio a replacement also for Nginx?
So is Istio a replacement for Nginx? It could be, but usually you'd have an ingress in front of your cluster. It could be an Nginx ingress or HAProxy ingress or traffic ingress. So you would keep your ingress, I guess. But it can do some of the things that the ingress can do. And also, it doesn't run as a pod, it runs as pods. So if you take a look at everything that Istio is installing, it's basically that, okay? Here I've got the full set of features installed. It's called the demo profile. And it's installing an ingress gateway, it's installing the sidecars, tracing, etc. So it runs in pods. So you need a not so little cluster at the beginning, but you can make it run locally. So if you have Docker Desktop or Minikube, there's a setup guide for you to install Istio. You should really try. It's not complicated. Give it a try and you'll like it. Thank you very much. Good.